are live. Welcome to Paperback Portals. I am Nicola Owen. I write as Talia Shwari, and I am here with my good friend Nabeel Mohammed, Nabeel Touya Mohammed, with his debut novel, To Love You in the Light of Other Stars. So, reading from the back of the book, Dr. Rebecca Zaidi is a brand new astronavigation expert, and she's off on her first voyage, sailing the stars in a merchant vessel. She wanted her first trip to be fun, exciting, and full of new experiences. What she didn't count on was a journey fraught with political intrigue, subterfuge, and most of all, romance, especially with another woman. Ainsley Woodhams is a gruff and gritty ship's engineer. She would love to be left alone to tinker with her machines and read the books she's collected from all over the galaxy. She didn't expect into her quiet life and open her heart in ways she never thought possible. When a mysterious alien comes between these two women with warnings about a deep space magic and a war that could tear the universe apart, Rebecca and Ainsley will have to make very hard choices. Where will love take them next? To Love You in the Light of Other Stars is the author Nabeel Touya Mohammed, and this is the cover.
Yep.
All right, so let's chat.
Yes.
Tell me about this book. Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, I bought a keyboard. That's how this all started. I
Mm,
bought a keyboard, yeah, because I have a fixation with keyboards. I like keyboards. I like the noise they make. I like, So it started was like I just want to buy a keyboard to connect to my tablet so I could,
mm,
play some games on it. And so games that require a keyboard, I could play those. And then I started to get bored of it and was like, well, what can I do with what do people do with keyboards generally that would get some use out of them? I was like, well, I could write something. And then the further inspiration came when my friend Warren LaPlatte, who Warren, if you're watching, it's your fault.
I remember.
Warren created a coloring book, which I don't think I have a copy of handy. But Warren created a coloring book with local Trini flavor in it. I think it's called the Corner House Chronicles, which is all from the viewpoint of the Mako living on the corner house. And he created this book and he published it himself on Kindle Digital Publishing. And so I
Right,
started to put two and two together in my head, right? Type a book, publish yourself. Type a book,
right.
publish. And it was like, okay. So then I thought about like what I'd been reading recently. And since the beginning of the year, I signed up for Kindle Unlimited on Amazon Prime. And I've been reading a lot of novels that you get on the platform. And
Right.
around Christmas time of last year, I read Terry Moore's Strangers in Paradise, which I'd always been told
Right.
was one of the best comics ever written. And I never got around to reading it. So I was like, okay, let's put this on my list and let's knock it out and read it. And it became one of the
Mhm.
most intense reads I'd ever read in my life. And at its core, it is a lesbian romance at its core. There's other things about the book. There's a mafia story going on. There's political intrigue. There's a little bit of mysticism going on. The book has everything, but at its core, it's a love story between two women, and that absolutely hooked me to the point where I started looking for other lesbian romance comics
Mhm.
to read. And then I ran out of those because I read every single one that was on the platform. And then so I started reading lesbian romance novels,
Right.
and I became obsessed. And I think I've read about 200 of them plus so far. And I start to like absorb like the patterns of how they're written and what people are looking for in them, and just really connecting with them personally as well. Like just I really just like the way that the stories are told. I like the emotions that come forward in them. And after reading them for like 6 months, I was just like, I think I could do this. All the things I have are here. I myself have graphic
You
design and
have
publishing
keyboard.
experience. I have keyboard. I have keyboard. I have the ability to use InDesign to put the book together as a PDF to send out. So everything fell into place, and I just went, yeah, I can do this. And so I just dedicated like an hour a day for a month. So that was like 30 hours total, maybe some more when when you feel the bug and you just keep going past your bedtime and you should have
Right.
been in bed like 2 hours ago. Um,
Right.
yeah, and you just keep going with it. And eventually I had a fully written thing. There's still some bugs. There's still a couple of things that need to be ironed out, which I will do in a further pass. But it's for the most part, the idea was to get the book out there and say I am a published author. Here's my book. And I might be working on a second one. I might be almost done with that. So there's that. Yeah, yeah.
For my wife, Artemis, the stars dim in thy presence, my love. That's our dedication.
And funny you should mention that because as of this Saturday, my wife is getting that phrase tattooed on her arm.
As she should. That is a
Hmm
good wife. That is good wifery. Good wife. Good
In my
wife.
handwriting, no
Good
less,
wife.
because they had me write it out on a piece of paper and scanned it in, and the tattoo artist is gonna do that for them this weekend. So that we're both looking forward to that very much because I actually have a tattoo of their handwriting here from a story that they wrote for me. So
Right.
we have a matching set
As one
as of
does. As one
yeah.
does. I think that is
So
really.
so when you
We've
see
had
me
this
write,
conversation before. We have
uh-huh,
had this conversation before about how I don't like romance in literature,
hmm
right? Because how come that happened in real life, but I carried it in a book?
fair, fair. I mean, you have to understand the romance that Artemis and I have has been so out of the ordinary and so storybook that I, when I write romance, I'm writing from what I know. I'm writing what I feel for my
Right,
wife, and
right.
I'm putting that into all the characters I write. I the things I feel for her go into the books,
Mm.
And for
And
those,
honestly, as
yeah,
sorry. Yeah, sorry.
no, I was just saying
No,
for
no.
those of
Somebody who has read the book, right?
Mhm,
Because as soon as I went to Miguel, I said, Miguel, you know the deal. He's like, right, good, yes, this one, yes, good.
mhm,
Nabila is writing her book. All right, well, let me know when it goes live. So I went and I tell my husband,
mhm,
I said, all right, well, let me know when you put money on your credit card because I want to buy it. Because I
yeah,
had to support my boy. That's my friend. Even though it's a romance, even though it's a
mhm,
romance,
mhm,
I support my boy.
mhm,
And he says, okay. Next thing, I was just gonna buy the Kindle version. Let's be real, because the cost of
yeah, yeah,
shipping
yeah.
a physical book to Trinidad
Being
is
what it is, yes, yeah, yeah,
it is what it is. So I'm thinking, well, okay, he's gonna tell me, and I'm gonna just get a Kindle version because hashtag support my boy.
right.
Next thing I know, Jetpack bringing me this. And I'm not, and I'm
Mhm,
vexed,
mhm,
right? And I feel like it's a romance novel that takes place in a sci-fi setting.
yes,
And
yeah,
quite frankly, I am a little upset with you, despite my 5-star rating that I gave you, because again, this boy, a little biased about you. It's my
mhm,
friend,
mhm,
right? This could have been a sci-fi novel
mhm.
with a romance subplot,
It could
but
have
it's the
been.
other way
That's
around.
not
It
what
could
I
have been.
wanted to
And I
write,
just want
though.
to say, no, no,
Yeah,
no, that's not a problem.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm a gracious queen. I'm gracious. I will allow you to write what you want to write.
But to more to that point, right? When I did
Mhm.
look at and read a lot of the lesbian romance that I was reading at the time, and even the straight romance was a lot of it is what they call cozy fiction. It takes place in the modern day. It's a very cozy
Right,
setting. The stakes are low. It is all it is about is these people's emotions and their relationship. And
right,
some of it is fantasy. There are quite a number of lesbian fantasy romances and straight romances that take place in Sword and Sorcery. There are significantly fewer set in space, which I thought was kind of strange because you can do a cozy setting in space. If anything taught us that Star
right,
Trek The Next Generation did, because Star Trek The Next Generation is a luxury cruise liner, right? It doesn't get
right,
cozier than that, when you think about it.
right,
So I was
right.
looking at something like that, but I also wanted it to have a little more personality and have a different tone than that. So I set it on a
Mm,
smaller ship that was kind of falling apart because that leads to some interesting drama. And
right.
yeah, I wanted to be cozy, but not overtly so. I didn't want the characters to have no challenges whatsoever. I wanted to keep a balance there as
Right.
well. So yeah, yeah. So it is a
And
romance, and
and
there
a
is
lot of
also
the
political intrigue as well.
right, and a lot of the coziness came from the characters finding that comfort in each other.
Yes.
Right. It wasn't about the ship.
Hmm
Right. I'm not gonna be feeling particularly cozy,
hmm
right? While we paying the pet tax early, boy.
she is her house. I just live in here, but yeah,
You just live in there. Yeah. I
yeah,
felt like the coziness came not from the setting, not from the
Mhm.
like the physical setting, but
Right.
from the space that the two characters why did I do this? A restaurant of all my cue cards.
Oh no.
That Rebecca and Ainsley created, like their moments together, they sharing their music, their books,
Hmm
right? Ainsley telling Rebecca how to find which I thought was like there was so many there's such good world building gems in it,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna um put your business out in the streets. You wrote this book in 21 days.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
did you did this level of world building, this political and you created these political challenges with
Hmm.
different planets and different realms. You created like various cultures
Yeah.
that were spread throughout. Um,
Hmm.
there's a lot of non-human diversity.
Yep. And
Right,
a lot of it comes from the idea that, and I go back to Star Trek because I love Star Trek, but I have
right,
criticisms of it. And one of my criticisms with Star Trek is that every alien race is just a human being with some funny thing on their face, right? Or pointed ears, or and there's
right,
a reason for that. Like if you go into Star Trek lore, there's a reason why they're all humanoid. Fine. But I
right,
wanted to throw that out the door. I wanted to consider what happens when some of them aren't humanoid. What happens when some of them have cultures so vastly different from humankind that we have to find analogies for them that work for them. What happens with, for instance, with one of the main characters where her hand gestures don't match human hand gestures? You know, like what kind of communication challenges does that bring? Because to explain for people who might not have read the book, one of the characters is reptilian, and they have very large eyes that can see an entire room in one go. So when they speak to people, they don't turn their heads to look at them because they can already see you. But as a concession to races that don't have that, that need eye contact, what they do is that when they're speaking to you, they hold their hand up like this and turn it in the direction of whoever they're speaking to, because that's
right,
what they would do. They don't have neck muscles that are developed to turn their heads to look because their eyes already have that full range of view. So you have to think about
mhm,
the biological development of these characters, and then also think about how do they concede when other races can't understand them, and then how do humans have to concede to that as well, because there are things that they can do that we can't do as well, and that comes up in the book over and over. It's about
right,
a universe that everyone has to share, and about the challenges that that comes with.
right. Um, you have a character who has these nice little nuggets in the beginning of each chapter, who's a poet.
Yes.
And the poet's name is Speaks with the Beauty of the Dawn, none so have matched in history.
Yes. The rough
Can you tell us,
approximation of the translation of his name. Yes.
right? Tell us more about this character
I don't want to
without
give.
spoiling,
Yeah,
without
we're not without
spoiling the
giving too much
ending.
away. He is a character that operates on the periphery of the story, and
Right,
every two chapters you get a poem from one of his great grand works and collections. So he is a well-renowned poet on his planet who is thought to have died at some point. Although we are now hearing that that story may not be true. He may still be alive. And I worked
rumors
this
of his
kind
death
of.
have been greatly
Exactly,
exaggerated.
it was greatly exaggerated,
Right,
yes. And I worked that plot in as a side plot to everything else that was going on
right.
because for some reason I just felt like writing poetry. I when I was growing up, I read things like Khalil Gibran, I read the Rubayat of Omar Khayyam, all the great old Arab poets that have this very aloof style of poetry writing. And I wondered what would that sound like if you weren't from Earth? Like if there was an analogous
Yeah,
style of poetry to that wasn't from Earth, and then what would its analogies be like? What And so I there was this weird thing about translation where the translator would always have to find what was closest in Earth analogy to what the poet was talking about, and then explain that it's nothing like that at all. And I thought that was incredibly funny. And the whole humor about an alien race being analogous to Earth was something I took a lot from people like Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams. I can't sit here and say that it was all my idea, because like I am greatly influenced by their work. Their work had a profound influence on me as I was growing up, and the kind of silliness that I could write because of men like them who came before me.
right.
Yeah.
I thought that there was so much that you packed into this little book. Like how what was the word count at the end of this?
I think it was something like 60,000. I was shooting for a bare minimum of 50,000. It was like 60 to
Right,
65,000. I think is where we're about right now. Yeah.
right. Which is good for a romance novel. And it's like like again, I loved it because it felt more sci-fi to me. But then those were
Sure.
the elements I was looking at, right?
Yeah.
And but it felt so densely written.
Hmm.
I when I said dense, I don't mean it was overpacked and I had to go back to double check to see who was what, or I didn't have to go through it to highlight it. It was very, very
Right.
well ordered,
Hmm.
but it was so very like I was like, wait a minute. Like a sci-fi novel is like 90 starts at 90K words.
Yeah.
because of the world building, but you did the world building so well unfolded
Hmm. It's
that
integrated in. Yeah.
yeah, it was well integrated.
I will tell you, there were some points where I went off on a tangent wheel building, and I sat back and read it back myself and went, I don't care. I'm here for, like, me. If I'm reading a romance novel, I'm here for Rebecca and Ainsley. I don't very much care about the extended politics of the world. I do care about them in so much that it brings them closer together. But when I sat and read,
Right,
it's like, when do we get back to Rebecca and Ainsley? I was like, well, hold on, I'm writing this. I can change that. So I would just delete paragraphs at a whim and just go, no, 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 we're going to bring this back to where it's supposed to be. I had that
right,
problem with the book I'm writing right now as well. I stumbled into a political subplot again and had to go,
right.
do I really care about this, or can I just pare it back to where it's important? You know?
And that often happens in D&D. And a couple of years ago, I remember we interviewed, we spoke about your work as a DM,
Yeah,
as a dungeon master, and
yeah,
how you often use that, um, how you use your ability to freestyle
yeah.
and tell a story on the fly, or sometimes you've had to create characters on the fly. And
Mhm.
the one thing that was important to you was that your audience doesn't feel like they are being what is the term I'm looking for? They're not feeling like you're just making things up as you go along,
Right. Yeah.
right? So
Or
they
that
feel
they're
like
being
this
strung
has
along with
been
unnecessary details either.
right. So this
Yeah,
needs to feel like it's been cooking for a couple of days. It's been on the
yeah.
stove.
Yeah, you have to think about the reader and put the reader first, always the reader first. And so, and if you read back your own work and you're not having a good time with it, you are the reader and you can change it, you know. So every time somebody complains that I didn't like this book because X happened, well, then when you write your own book, that's still the mindset that you have to go in with. Did I like that this happened? Did I hate that this happened? And sometimes you have to find the thing that you hate happening and go, well, why do I hate it? And do I like that hate? Do I want to feel more of that
Right,
hate? I've had to write characters that I don't like I that I can't stand, and I write them because they make me feel a certain way. I've had to
right,
I've had to kill off characters in both books that, like, I like these characters a lot and I don't want them to die, but that's the reason why I kill them off, because I don't want them to die. Like, I as the reader, I as the writer don't want them to die, but killing them off would hurt in a profound way. And sometimes we need that. We need art that moves us. We need art that makes us feel something.
right,
And when you kill off a character that people love, especially if there's a reason for them plot wise to do so, I think you should. I think you should learn to let go of the things that you love in order to hurt the reader in a way that is delicious. I might be a little sadistic, just saying.
just a um.
I
So
had a situation just last night where I wrote a chapter in the new book,
right.
and everything at
Hmm.
the end of the chapter was like, oh yes, we've come to a solution and we're gonna move forward with the plan. And I read it back and I went, no, no, that's too easy. So then I rewrote it and said, no, these two characters break up, and now we get two more chapters figuring out how to put them back together. So
Just
sometimes,
looking through the chat because, as you know, once we start vibing, we just forget
yeah,
everybody,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Mojo mood. Sometimes you just stumble into political intrigue. It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. That happens, and I mean, it happens
I,
in
I
real
wanna
life. It happens in real life. It's going to happen in a
I want to
story.
credit I want to credit one author in particular that I really enjoyed, Jen Lyons. She wrote
Mm,
a trilogy of books called The Senator's Wife, which already from the title alone, you already know this is political. It is a
right.
lesbian romance, a sapphic romance between a married senator's wife and a football player. And it's a trilogy, which, first of all, it's like, well, how do you make a trilogy out of a romance story? Don't people fall in love at the end of book one and that's it? But no,
Right.
because she's a sitting senator's wife, one of the characters is, there is a lot of political intrigue around that. There's a lot of hiding. There's a lot of, well, how do we get out of the situation? And then her husband is a terrible person who, not to give away the point of the book, but she is beholden to him in a lot of ways through business
Mm,
and through politics that are very hard to get out of. And that you would be surprised, stretches out into a good 3 books. Like I gave all three 5 stars. I love that series. You
Hmm.
know, if she, I left reviews saying that, this has been one of the most engaging books I've ever read, and I'm so glad I went through the entire trilogy. I was intending to read the first one and put it down, right? Oh, okay, yeah, they're in love at the end of the
Right.
book. Okay, whatever. No, I lived with those characters for 3 solid books, and I loved every minute of it. And the world building only helped because she built this world where these two women were tied together by situations they couldn't control. And I think when you build a political subplot, that's what you're doing. You're putting characters in situations that they can't control, which I know is counterintuitive to writing a cozy story, but yeah, for me, I need a little conflict to move the plot forward. I need the two characters to want to be together in the face of any kind of odds, because honestly, like, having married someone from Australia, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to want to be with someone and there's things in the way. I know what that's like, and
Like
I
the
want my
entire,
readers
like
to realize,
literally the entire world, right?
yeah,
Like half the
absolutely,
world.
yeah,
Yeah, it's half a planet.
just
Yeah.
half a planet,
Um.
yeah,
But yes, but tension is what keeps the reader engaged.
yeah,
Conflict is what keeps the reader engaged.
yes,
Um, and again, going back to it's just about, this is just personal. This is not I hate you because you read romance or write romance or whatever. But my thing with romance in particular is that if it doesn't end with a happily ever after or a happily for now, the HFN or the HEA type
yeah,
endings, then it's not a romance. It's an entirely different genre altogether.
sure,
However,
hmm,
what makes to me all romance ends, right? I
yeah,
watched my father die. I watched the end of the romance between my parents. I watched that happen,
right, yes,
right? One person walks away for one reason or another. Things happen. It doesn't make, and I to me, like, me getting married
hmm,
was this will sound so stupid. Yeah, friction makes the sparks fly. Correct.
hmm,
By Mojo Mood. Yeah. So in addition, it's one thing to have conflict. It's one thing to have a romance end, but doesn't that, or to see things end, but doesn't that make when it's happening or while it's happening even sweeter?
true, absolutely, and I have read. Particularly, I find this is more true of romance comics than it is of romance novels. Some books that do not end happily, and they end with someone moving on in their lives, and that is something that can happen. I remember I was reading. I was actually just trying to find the name of it, but I can't seem to find it. It was something of Earth. There was a comic that was about a lesbian couple, and it was a sci-fi lesbian romance where one of them left to go serve in the army of the world that they were serving. The other one became a rebel,
Right,
and the rebel one went to find the other one, and the other one went to live on a planet where time moves slower. So
right,
what ended up happening? I don't want to spoil the end of the book, but then the end, nobody actually knows what the name of the book is right now because I haven't said it because I can't remember it. But
right. Is it spoiled if you didn't call a title? No.
right, the one that left to go be in the army, like, she is approached by this young woman, maybe 3 or 4 years after, who says that she is the granddaughter of the woman that she was in love with, because again, time moves differently. And she came to tell her that, my grandmother fell in love with another woman and they had a beautiful life together, and she said that if I were ever meet you, to give you this letter. And it's a sad ending, but it's a
Right.
beautiful ending. It is an ending that
Yeah.
that ties up the story in a way that was unexpected. And that's
Right.
the thing, you can't always give the reader what they want. When I finished my book and I gave it, and I had other people read it prior to its release, I had one friend, Hafsa, if you're watching, this is you, um, who asked me to write a sequel in which I had the characters go back in time to prevent one character dying. And I thought to myself, cute, but I'm not gonna do that because I don't reverse deaths. That's a comic book thing. I don't do that. Um, because that's for me, deaths have to mean something. When a character dies, it has to be
Yeah.
for a reason. But Hafsa, thank you for the suggestion, but I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, no, but it's a testament to how much people like that character that she would make that request. For me to go back and reverse that. But yeah, you can't always give the reader what they want. Sometimes you have to hurt them because then they remember it. They remember that pain that the book gave them. And sometimes when a book makes you hurt, it's one of the best feelings ever.
Yes. Well, my favorite novel of all times, Micaiah Johnson's The Space Between Worlds. I quote from that like it's,
Yes, yes.
yeah, I love that book.
Mhm.
No book will ever beat it. And that book jerks me around by my scrap.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
oh, these are expectations. This is a garbage bin. Here,
yeah,
she just threw. Every time I think, okay, I loved every second of it.
yeah.
So I think, just like strategically put, just
I think my favorite, my favorite novel of all time is House of Leaves, which I think you still have my copy of that book right now.
yes, I
Not
do.
like I'm not gonna buy another copy at some point. Um,
No, no, I'll
but
return it. I promise. I promise.
that book subverts your expectations so much. I'll tell you something about the book. You have the copy in your hands at the moment. I'm gonna say something you
Right.
probably don't know. Do you know there's a hidden alternate ending in the book? Do you know where it's hidden? Okay, so when
In the
you
book.
open the book, there's that photo collage of stuff on a desk.
Right. Yeah.
That's the author's desk. Look for his notes about the ending. You'll find the hidden ending in there. It's right there in plain text. I love that book. I love that book so much. You have no
I'll
idea.
finish read it.
It is a book
When my
about the
son
plot,
starts
about the
school on
structure
Monday,
of a novel.
yeah.
It,
Oh,
it's one of those books that look, a lot of people call it pretentious, and it is. Um, but it's pretentious in a way that defies pretension. It's
right.
pretentious in a way that if you look for the pretension in it, you're the fool. And I had that done to me in the book. In the process of solving a word puzzle in the book, where the solution
Right.
came up, this is just a list of names. Where the solution of the puzzle was, why are you wasting your time on this puzzle? It doesn't mean anything. And I just sat there and went, wow, wow, I've never been played by a book before. Like, this is amazing. If anybody out there is listening to this, if you haven't read House of Leaves, if you want a book that will challenge your preconceptions of what a book can be, and this isn't even a romance book, I'm not even pimping for romance books right now. In terms of just novel writing, read House of
Right.
Leaves. You owe it to yourself to read it. If you are a reader of any caliber, you deserve to read House of Leaves and have it challenge you in that way. That's my plug for Moxie Danielewski now. That's out of the way.
I haven't. I've been meaning to get around to it, but life gets in the way. Right.
That
We've
is a
had
dense
some.
book. That is a book you're gonna have to
Yeah.
make some notes and refer back to. I remember one of my favorite YouTubers, Nightmind, did a breakdown of the book, and the breakdown is 9 hours long. The breakdown of the book is 9 hours long.
I'm gonna probably take like half that time to physically read it to like go through the individual words. But
Hmm.
uh, Mojo first of all, thank you so much for interacting with us. Thanks for this other comment. It uses the actual structure of how a novel is physically constructed. Fuck with you, and it's awesome.
It absolutely does. Yeah,
Awesome. All right.
absolutely
So
does.
I'm
It
going
is a
to.
big influence on me as a novel writer, and I've actually been thinking recently about how to play with the structure of a novel as well. Danny Lusky
Right.
has also written a book called Only Revolutions, which is about two immortal people who are on journeys from opposite ends of the world to meet each other. And the book is written in such a way that it's written in two halves. One half is read this way, and the other half you have to turn the book upside down to read.
Right. Right.
Which again plays with the physical concept of a novel. I've been thinking
Right.
about doing something similar as well. I was actually thinking, and I may not do this idea, so I'm free to let this go and let somebody else have it, of writing two side by side novels about two people falling in love, and then have the last few chapters be alternating lines of text that you'd have to hold the pages up to each other to read the entire work.
Right.
I
That's
may
good.
not end up doing this, but
That's gonna be a little difficult on Kindle, but we'll figure something out.
and that's kind of what stopped me from doing it. But also, it would force people to buy the physical copies. So, uh,
It's a
look,
marketing tactic at this point.
if back in the day Sega could make me buy an extra cartridge to plug onto Sonic 3 to play an entire game, you all could buy an extra
Uh-huh.
copy of a book to actually finish the story. Okay, you could buy DLC for my book. That's what. Actually,
Wow.
speaking of that, speaking of DLC for
Uh-huh.
my book, I'm actually thinking of. So I did my gimmick again, where I put poetry in between the chapters of the current book I'm writing, which is as yet unnamed. Um, but I'm thinking of actually taking those poems, putting them in a separate book, and filling out the entire thing and making it a separate standalone book that is the poetry from the interstitials in the other book, which also those
Right.
poems do tie into the plot in a way which I'm not going to let right now. but trust me, it's good. And by the time you finish the novel, you're going to want the entire book of poetry. So I
Right.
the poetry is easy for me to write because all I do is I think about my wife and it just comes. It just like everything I feel just flows out of me. And I've written some of those poems in under a couple of minutes and I read them back and they're a little rough, but they stay the way they are because that's what I was feeling in that moment. Gets us to yes.
So
Yes.
this Miguel left this comment.
Hmm.
This random strange individual who I've never seen or met before says, "Do it," and he says, "Make buying books great again."
Maybe I'm not gonna use those exact words, but yeah.
uh, Mojamud, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Mojo Mood. Yeah, yeah. It's about
Okay,
right. Yeah.
cool. Good. I was thinking of writing a book that is two alternate concurrent running story, and the ends both is in the physical middle of the book. I'm serious.
That's exactly what Danielowski did with Only Revolution. So I'm sorry to tell you, it's not an original idea, but I don't think you shouldn't do it. I especially if you
Yes.
haven't read Only Revolutions, it's original to you. It was a good idea to you, and you should still do it or do it in a different way. That's up
Yes.
to you.
Invent things that existed all along. Did you know
Yeah,
I independently invented urban fantasy, like
really.
all of urban fantasy. Yeah.
The world owes
Like,
you
what
a
would
great debt,
happen if
I'm
we
sure.
took mythological creatures and myths and legends and so on and put them in modern times? It's like, I was so smart, so brave, so
I
wonderful.
actually years ago I had an idea to do a comic about a fantasy setting that was also a police procedural. Um, and then Will Smith came out with that movie Bright, and I had to abandon that idea entirely. But my idea was like I had this idea like 5, 10 years before he came out with that movie. But then he did it terribly, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna let that one go.
Here's what makes a lot of these things terrible. I
Mhm.
think it's if we didn't have like it if it was it's good enough.
Yeah,
Honestly, it was good enough. It was I don't want to say mediocre because mediocre has negative connotations, but
sure.
it's middle of the it's like it's good. It was good.
I'll tell you.
But
I'll
here's
tell
the
you what is.
problem. Here was
Uh,
a real problem, and here was a fantastic sin that Bright committed. It could have
yeah.
been great.
Yes, it
It
absolutely
could
could have.
have been, and that is the problem. Right?
So
That is the problem with a lot of these things. And it could have been great. And we're sitting there, we're seeing all of the elements that could have made it great right there
yeah,
on the screen. And it's not tied together, or the potential and the promises are not being realized.
I'll tell you
Right?
the part of my story that I may still salvage and rework into something else. So is the idea of a forensic wizard.
No, please.
Yeah,
Please do that. Please. Please. Look,
I
you have women
we
begging you
might
on the internet.
we might be looking at book three then. If I could turn that into a lesbian romance, so somehow we might have book three. No, I like the idea of a
Honest,
forensic wizard who knows things about magic that can be used in order to deduce the solution of a thing. I'm bad at writing mysteries though. Like I think I'm great at it, but I know I'm bad at it. So I have to write a mystery that is worthy of the book and is worthy of the reader. Like I want to write a mystery so good that by the time the
let's
character in
chat.
the book solves it, mm,
Let's chat on the weekend.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
chat on the
But
weekend.
what I'm saying is, I want to
About
write a mystery.
specifically about this.
Yeah, yeah. I want to
Specifically
write a
about this.
mystery so good that the reader throws the book down in disgust when they couldn't figure it out. That's what I want to do. I don't know if I can do that, but that's my goal. That's where I'm setting the bar. Okay? That's where I'm setting the bar.
What mystery did that to you? What mystery did that for you?
It's not from a book. Does that count?
It counts.
It's from a video game.
Uh-huh.
Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. The final case of that game has a solution so insane that Artemis and I replayed it recently because it's one of my favorite games of all time.
Right.
And it's not just the solution, but it's how it ties into every other case in the game. Every case in the game that you thought
Mm,
was just an unrelated random case is absolutely related to this case. And then the
right.
bombshell is dropped at the end of the story that two of the characters are related by blood. And here's the kicker: you, the player, are given that information with one visual, and the characters don't know it. In fact, those characters don't know it till 4 games later.
I'm going to go back to a previous comment from Mojo Mood. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
your engagement. This is him describing that case. That fucking
That fucking case. That case is
yeah,
amazing. Um, and also, by the way, I know we're coming up on the end of the half hour.
yeah.
If you would like, at some point here before we end, I can read an excerpt from the new book if your viewers would like that.
I was going to ask you to do that personally, but one
I
thing I
can give you
wanted
a
to
preview.
mention,
Yes.
right? One thing I wanted to mention,
hmm
your ambassador,
Yes, Zerica. Yes.
right? And the planet that she's from, the
hmm
culture specifically that she's from,
Yes.
um, has a very defiant, monogamous relationship because she's so stunning, so brave,
Right.
right?
hmm
How to put it, this subversive monogamous relationship when
Yes.
everyone is in normalized polygamous relationships. Did you want to
Yeah.
touch on that a little bit?
So that was it's a simple idea of inverting the trope, right? On
Right,
I myself and I've known other people who have been in polyamorous relationships. And it's
right,
an easy, comfortable. I am in a monogamous relationship right now, let that be said, but
right,
I don't begrudge people who want polyamorous. In fact, I'm very an ardent ally and supporter of that because I feel like a lot of people would be better off happy if they knew that that was a thing that existed for them. And I wanted to
right.
invert that idea. What if there was a society where a polyamorous relationship between three people is the norm, but loving one person is seen as somehow heretical or rude or antithetical to society in some way? And we even see
Right.
that with LGBT relationships in the real world. There are people who are like, well, LGBT people shouldn't be together because it doesn't produce children, which somehow is supposed to be the end product of any relationship. And I've never really understood that. Even before I understood what relationships were about, I don't think I ever really understood relationships being solely for the product of children. I think that LGBTQ couples, if they want to have kids and they want to adopt and they want to raise kids, I think that's a fine and noble precept as well. But I do not think that raising children, producing children needs to be the be all end all of a relationship. And I wanted to think about that in another framework, another form. And again, this is one of those things that Star Trek did very well, was to frame modern day societal commentary in ways that are alien. I remember in Star Trek: The Next Generation, Frank Gorshin was in an episode where he was from a race of aliens that their skin was half white and half black, and
Right.
he was seen verbally abusing another one of those same aliens, and the crew comes over and says, well, why are you treating him like this? And he says, well, he's from an inferior race than me. And they said, but you're from the same race. He says, no, don't you see, he's white on the right side, I'm white on the left side. And just to put it in perspective how silly that argument looked, and then
Mm,
to look at our society and look at, like, yeah, you see what I'm saying? Like the idea to abstract a societal discussion
yeah.
lets us look at it in the silliest way possible, and that allows us to see how silly the arguments against it are. And that was the entire precept of that relationship structure being analyzed. Sci-fi and fantasy have a way of letting us look at ourselves through a warped mirror in order to see ourselves reflected. Yeah.
Which is why I don't understand the criticism that sci-fi is suddenly woke. I'm like, but they've always been.
It's always been
And
like
I
that.
think
I don't know where you all have
was it
been.
Strange New Worlds? Strange New Worlds. Yeah, they
Mhm.
say, oh, it's no longer woke, and I'm like, this was my favorite episode, and I'm like, but this is
Let's
that social
rewind.
commentary. This is
Let's
based
rewind.
on
Can
those
can
who
we
walk away from the
can we
based
remember
on
that Star Trek is the series that had the first interracial kiss on television? If I'm not mistaken, also the first kiss between two women on television. Um, if you all are coming to Star Trek now to complain about it being woke, you all are tourists and you need to sit down and learn.
no, I'm fine with tourists, it's just understand that
Sure.
this is how many ever years ago. And so when they're advocating for things, have they not now been paying attention? Oh yeah, have they
Right.
not been paying attention? No,
Exactly.
they have not. They have not, because when I think what was it? It was a panel on women in sci-fi,
Mhm.
and somebody said women ruin sci-fi.
Women started
No, we
sci-fi.
created it. I'm saying
Yeah.
we, but Mary Shelley,
Yes.
right, a born teenager, wrote Frankenstein
hmm
and invented sci-fi.
Yeah. And by the
I,
way, as we're speaking of representation, I do want to address the thing that I could see some people saying about my that I am quote unquote a man who's writing lesbian romance, and I can see how that can be seen as coming from the outside. But I just
I
want
remember
to
we had this convo. Yeah.
we did. I want to assure my readers and my potential readers that if you think the book is being written by a straight cis man, it's not. I'm neither straight nor am I'm what I would say gender questioning, as you can see by my fabulous jewelry. I am in the
Gender
process of
men.
figuring things out, and yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's always been there. So I mean, um,
Yeah.
but I'm in the process of figuring things out, and maybe I always will be. But the point of the matter is that I'm writing from a place that I understand, and I'm writing it to share it with other people. And I'd love to say that
Right.
I've put the book out into a lot of women spaces. My wife has helped me with this to put the book into women only spaces, and they've loved it. I've gotten glowing 5-star reviews from gold star lesbians, put it that way. And I can think of no greater honor than to be
Yeah.
told that they resonated with the work that I wrote, and that makes me in turn feel accepted. Um, in a space
Now,
that maybe I don't belong
if
in,
I
but
start a conversation about men writing women and that conversation, right?
and some of it's
Men
terrible.
writing
Don't get me
women
wrong.
has
Some
a
of it is absolutely terrible, right?
no. Men writing women is used as a pejorative. It's a slur. If I
Yeah,
say, well, I read this and this was very men writing women, please feel offended.
yeah,
Be
yeah,
offended because I
yeah,
meant
absolutely.
full offense. I meant it
Yes,
disrespectfully. Right. But
yes,
if I say, you really did really good character work, I love how you handled it, I will never say this was very man writing women,
yeah,
because I wouldn't say that about well done character work. I wouldn't say that about well researched work. I wouldn't say that
and
about, and I
all of the
actually
people, yeah,
think, and if I ever say it's men writing women, I'm basically calling you a bad writer,
right.
because
And
you
I
should
would
have,
like to say,
yeah,
yeah, but all of the people who have read the first book before its release were women. Yourself, you got to read a lot of it. My
right.
friend Anna,
Before,
I want to shout out Anna and Hafsa, who is
right,
probably watching still. These were three women whose input I greatly appreciated in terms of making sure that the characters felt real and that they didn't feel tokenized and they didn't feel like they were being written from a perspective that didn't understand them. And there's a lot of me and my wife in the characters that I write, and my wife is somebody whose feelings and opinions I care a great deal about. I listen to a great
right,
deal. I share a life with them, and it's one of those things where, like, if I don't understand that, and my wife is non-binary as well, so I mean, like saying that I'm writing a woman's perspective by writing my wife's perspective is still misleading. But at the end of the day, we're all people, and if all the women who have read my book feel a kinship to it and feel that they understand it, then that is the greatest honor I could have as a writer, is to be told that women like my writing.
and we have some fabulous artwork in the book to be colored in.
No, well, there's a color version of that, but the book is printed in black and white, so I only put the line art in there. So yes,
Right. So is it like, I can color it in the back and it's fine?
it's your copy of the book. You do whatever you want.
All right. Now, we both started this conversation. It's like, oh my God, we're a little nervous. It's been a while since we've done this. This was supposed to be a 30-minute conversation. It's like, why are we nervous? Why are we
I
nervous?
don't know.
We've been
I don't know.
friends.
I don't know.
We are like, we will talk for forever. All
Yeah.
right. So let's wrap this up. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you
Did you want me
so
to
much
read
for your
the
And
excerpt
yes,
from?
could you
Yes.
kindly read the excerpt from book number two,
So
as yet untitled?
as yet untitled. So
As yet
the
untitled.
concept of this excerpt is the two main characters, Hadria, who is a hill giant, and Vanya, who is an elven princess, are at a bookstore, and they are talking to Bregan, who is the witch who owns the bookstore. And I'm going to start here. Just some light reading then, the witch observed as Vanya rested the batch of books on the oaken counter with a resounding thud. For starters, Vanya said, I'd call it a cursory sampling of your wares. Wouldn't you agree, Hadria? The giantess chuckled as she was leafing through a single volume propped up on the counter. A tiny one, your majesty, she rejoined. Let's hope the appetizer leads you to a bigger meal next time, then, Bregan shot back as she turned her head and cupped her hand to her mouth. Goose! She shouted in a raspy bark. The grey cat at the window turned its sleepy head to her. Get the abacus for me, Goose, Bregan ordered, clapping her hands together for emphasis. You named your cat Goose? Vanya said out loud, though she half intended to just internalize the thought. No, I named my goose Goose, Reagan clarified unhelpfully. The cat walked past Vanya, looked up at her, opening its mouth to let out a loud honk. Ah, Vanya said. I see. She didn't. I cast a charm on him years ago, Regan said, hands on her hips, after he terrorized half the town and they ended up at my doorsteps with pitchforks to get rid of the little bastard. She shrugged. So I made him look like a cat. Vanya's eyebrows raised. And the charm has lasted years, you say? Oh, yes, Regan nodded as the cat returned from a cupboard bearing an abacus in its mouth. Regan put out a hand for the abacus as Goose leapt up onto the countertop. That's amazingly powerful, Vanya admitted. And you've never had to recast it? Vanya was genuinely amazed. She'd only ever heard of such enchantments being used, but her own mastery of elemental magic afforded her none of these kinds of trickery. Recast it? No. In fact, I've been waiting for it to wear off because I don't know how to reverse it. As she said this, the cat dropped the abacus out of the witch's reach and laid down. She regarded him with an unimpressed look. Thank you, Goose. Did it work? Vanya asked. Did the town people stop looking for him? Bregan wiped the abacus free of cat spittle and began moving beads back and forth. Oh, yeah, sure. They stopped looking for my goose. That's true. But now they want to kill the cat. I do think the second book is one of the funniest things I've ever written. Um,
Right.
it is still primarily a romance. It's primarily a romance, secondarily a fantasy, and thirdly a comedy. But those things may as well be an equal measure, I think.
Right. I mean, I'll attempt to forgive you for the romance, right? But I'll attempt.
Last thing before we end, I just want to say
Right.
when my wife and I took a trip to New York at the beginning of this year, when I had just started reading again, we went on a book
Right.
tour of New York City. We went on to all the major bookstores, which was lovely. One of the
Right.
places I wanted to take my wife to was a place called the Ripped Bodice, which shout out to them. Great little bookstore run by queer people. It is primarily a romance bookstore. They sell romance novels straight and LGBT as well. And we went there and I didn't buy anything. I bought a handful of stickers because they had nice artwork on them. I didn't buy any books.
Right.
Fast forward 6 months later, and I'm now repeatedly kicking myself for not picking up armloads of romance novels, knowing now how much I like them. So I guess I'm gonna have to go back at some point.
Right. So Miguel is like, you couldn't hear it because I'm wearing on my headset. And he's downstairs in the office, and your ex had him dying.
I
Right.
can't wait to
So,
publish it. I can't wait to publish it. We are maybe a month away from it being published. I'm gonna put my hands together and say generously a month, perhaps half that. But I don't wanna to talk a big deal and not deliver. So let's say a month. Let's
right.
give it a month.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you again so much for doing this with me. I appreciate it. You've always supported my endeavors.
And you have supported
Um,
mine greatly.
because that's what friends do. And I
Absolutely.
would like to announce my guest for next week, the incomparable Gabriela Buba, Scenes of Storm and Sorrow. That's her debut novel. And I'm going to read the excerpt in this fiercely imaginative Filipino inspired fantasy debut. A bisexual nun hiding a God given gift is unwillingly transformed into a lightning rod for her people's struggle against colonization. Perfect for fans of lush fantasy full of morally ambiguous characters, including the Poppy War and the Jasmine Throne. Maria Lenuren has been living a double life for as long as she can remember. To the world, she is Sister Maria, dutiful nun and devoted servant of Ainila's Cudician colonizers. And I do know, by the way, that I am mispronouncing 90% of these things. But behind closed doors, she's a storm caller, chosen daughter of the Ainilan goddess Anitun Tabu, in hiding not only from the Codicians and their witch hunts, but also from the vengeful eye of the slighted goddess. Lenurin does what she can to protect her fellow Ainulans and the small family she's created in the convent, her lover Catalina and Kat's younger sister Inez. Lenurin is determined to keep her head down until she makes a devastating discovery which threatens to tear her family apart. In desperation, she turns for help to Alon Dakila, heir to Ainela's most powerful family, who has been ardently in love with her for years. But this choice sets in motion a chain of events beyond her control, awakening Anitun Tabu's rage and putting everyone Lunurin loves in terrible danger. Torn between the call of Alon's magic and Catalina's jealousy, her duty to her family and to her people, Lunurin can no longer keep Anitun Tabu's fury at bay. the goddess of storms demands vengeance, and she will sweep aside anyone who stands in her way. And if you thought that was dramatic, that book had me in tears. And
Yeah.
it's like, mostly from the tension. And as that tension slowly melted away, coming down to the of that story,
Mhm.
it was so like, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And she will
I
be here. Same bad time, same bad channel next week,
I'm gonna
Wednesday,
try to
7:30.
get a copy of it on digital and see if I can finish it before next week so I can watch that. But I have to balance that with finishing my book and also doing artwork as well. So
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
we'll try. We'll try. It sounds good.
We'll try. I mean, even if you're not ready by next week, but you and I will still need to sit and have a talk. And I would also love anybody who is following with these books, who read these books, and we can get together, have a chat online. This is part of the show. Um, and we can do a wrap up and we can discuss these wonderful books that we've been reading, these wonderful books I'm telling you all about. you know. So
Yeah.
again, same bad time, same bad channel. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining in. Thanks for coming. Have a good night. Bye.